Our solar system had its start with the birth of the great central sun, Oversoul Michael. The space was empty until the swirling cloud nebulae of which Michael was a part started forming into a solid mass. He deemed it wise to not get caught at that time in the swirling gases, but to stand above, separate for that instant in time, to watch and see what came of the tempest. Michael watched fascinated and excited as the central sun hardened into a solid, forming his physical body. The cloud of whirling gases broke into many different sized clouds of gas. The next stage was the phenomenon of like attracts like, which led to the grouping together of gases and bits of congealing nebulae into all those of like mind. Each constellation pulled its resources of thought forms and gave birth to a planet, or perhaps even twin or triplet planets. Our Oversoul Michael has 12 suns. When planet Earth was born, it came under the domain of his son Lucifer, our sun, the sun we see up in our sky. He, Lucifer, is the oversoul of this planet Earth, and does have brothers, the other sons of Michael. One of the other Michael sons is named Satania, and the planet Satania is named for him. It is the capital ruling world of our solar system, and we actually know nothing of it. This capital world of Satania is on the other side of the sun. It is a world constantly blocked from the view of those on Earth. The creation story, as written in the Bible, is for planet Earth. The Bible does not take into account any pre-existence to life on the Earth plane. There was life on other planets for the divine sparks before they showered on Earth. They had been on 3 previous planets and evolved through the processes on them. There has never been any breakthrough about this before. It is now time that these facts become known. It is necessary at this point in evolution. In order to give a more complete understanding of our Oversoul Michael, I will designate a difference between my use of the terms flare and comet. When I use the word comet, it will mean a thought form which is invisible, esoteric, or inner. The following information came from the website for 9planets.org. Comets are invisible except when they are near the sun. Most comets have highly eccentric orbits, which take them far beyond the orbit of Pluto. These are seen once and then disappear for millennia. When speaking of a flare, it will mean a solar flare, or flare of fire, which is visible, exoteric or outer. Shown here is an image of the sun in soft X-rays from the Yoko Soft X-ray telescope. The white, brightest region on the right-hand side shows post-flare loops, hot loops that remain after a solar flare. While a comet thought travels through dimensions and is unmanifested, a flare does not travel through different dimensions. It is a physical matter. A comet, thought, can cross solar systems, galaxies, and universes. A flare does not. The life lived on the first 3 planets was not of the kind that can even be conceived of by humanity, but they did have an evolutionary plan like planet Earth has. These early planet evolutionary chains are not appealing to us. The first one is simply air, that's all, just the atmosphere itself. But this is the start of life in our solar system, ions and neutrons that make up air, electrically charged air that eventually start forming into thoughts and ideas. In the beginning of the universe, there was vast emptiness, a void, nothing but black space. But you see, there is another universe beyond this one, and a comet, explorers from that universe, invaded this black space, and their momentum of traveling through it set up the motion that started the swirling of the energy that then started attracting and repelling and forming into groups and storms. This is the very beginning of humanity's spiritual or esoteric evolution. These explorers, the comet, passed through this empty black space close enough to the first planet to start the process of life on it. There was a spark of energy from that comet that was part of the energy that washed planet number 1, Orion. When this comet got close enough that the energy waves from it washed ashore onto planet number 1, Orion, these little tiny thought forms of air formed. The subatomic particles started attracting and repelling. It grew to be quite a large thinking mass of air. This is quite difficult for us to understand. This is the birth of Lucifer's mind, which you will soon see becomes the mind of all humanity when it shatters. The flares are from our sun Lucifer. When Orion passed through the force field of the Oversoul, it caused a solar flare on Lucifer, our sun, which in turn caused the disturbances in the atmosphere of Orion. The first solar flare was named ammonia. As a flare of energy, it caused the air on the planet Orion to join and mix and mingle with the Oversoul. There was not much that this flare was capable of doing, only breathing air and blowing it around. This flare, Demonia, had a barren existence and did not accomplish much. All he could do was stay on planet number 1 as air until planet number 2 had hardened and formed enough so that he could move to it. When the large thinking mass of air formed enough to ask, "Is this all there is?" it immediately found itself on the second planet. Here it developed into small ringlets of atoms that made up storms, wind and rain. He, the first flare, Demonia, then continued this way as air through all the planets and went back into the body of Michael. Michael, the creator god, did not get much satisfaction out of that stage of experimentation. Michael then sent out another solar flare from Lucifer, our sun. The name of this flare was Harmonia. Harmonia intermixed with the Oversoul's second pass and caused separation into groups of harmonious thought forms. This flare also went first to planet number 1, experienced the same thing Demonia had, and passed on to planet number 2, Placida, Jupiter. Placida was a little more advanced world. Here Harmonia watched her breath form into playful little ringlets of atoms, chasing each other around and enjoying themselves and having fun. By this time, Placida was getting more of an atmosphere and a solid core to it, and had more energy coming off of it, more sparking that caused Harmonia to separate and join into little thought forms, little groups. Perhaps we could call them musical chords or triads. This is planet number 2, Placida, Jupiter. Harmonia then left planet number 2 and moved through the rest of the planets and returned to Michael. Neither of these flares shattered into separated divine sparks. They experienced all as whole beings, whole flares. From the first flare, Demonia, he learned to make thought forms. On the second planet, he had Harmonia, the second flare, set the pattern into musical groups, because he, Michael, felt that after sending that first flare out and getting absolutely no return back through his filament thread, that maybe he'd better have some structure, some rhythm and harmony, some harmonious mathematical structuring. This was one of the concepts that he wanted to try out. So he set the pattern that when the flare moved to number 2, they formed into definite groupings of harmony. The next flare was called Satania, the third pass or trip of the Oversoul. It also went to planet number 1, Orion. Planet number 1 was arid and barren of growth. Perhaps I should say barren of nutrients. It was rock surface. By the time Satania, the third flare, got to planet number 2, Placida, there was more nourishment, more interaction with more compounds in the soil, more minerals to feed this thought form. This planet was not as barren as planet number 1. There was no soil, there was just the beginning of sand crumbling off the rock surface. But here they were on planet number 2 with Satania, the third flare, and there was a lot of stimuli on this planet. There began to be what you would term debates, perhaps. A group of thought forms would join together here because they thought alike. Perhaps this group liked the atmosphere up on top of a certain point, and another group thought perhaps the vibrations felt better to them at a different spot, and this other group began to wonder if there was more to life than what they were seeing on this planet number 2. There was more on planet number 2 than there had been on planet number 1, certainly, but not an awful lot more. The group that started wondering if there was more life than this started spreading the dissatisfaction, the unrest, to the others. The little storms started growing more agitated. Fights broke out, and they knew they just couldn't stay there. They knew that planet number 2 could not contain them. They had grown. They just had to break out of the walls of planet number 2. There just had to be something more. What an existence this was, just floating around there all day long, arguing with the sky and arguing with that one. They couldn't even punch each other out because they were just thought forms. There was a lot of mental debate going on, a lot of arguing back and forth about things. Eventually, the groups got tired of playing around this way. Even though it is pleasant, it begins to seem quite useless. When this thought strikes this particular ringlet of energy, it leaves the atmosphere of planet number 2 and proceeds to planet number 3. The storms grew bigger and bigger, and they finally just left planet number 2, whoosh, in one huge cloud of energy. It was not in the form of fire or anything like that. It was still just like a cloud, only a big, rolling, tumbling, turmoiling cloud, and it went to planet number 3, which was Mars. The cloud was still in the gaseous form, but soon developed into a thinking bolt of lightning, an electrical line of energy. Demonia gave us the word demon, Harmonia gave us the word harmony, and Satania gave us the word Satan. The next flare to come is named Persephonia, and will give us the word perish. It is the cause of the vibrational disturbances felt at this time. The first flare was of a positive nature, male energy. The second flare was negative, female energy. And the third flare was again positive. The new flare is negative or female energy. Remember, please, that these are the names of flares, which are atmospheric disturbances. This flare will be stronger even than the third flare was, and will intermix again with the Oversoul, and will cause much upheaval and death on planet Earth. But another meaning of Persephonia is personification of revival of nature in spring. But planet number 3 was not what he expected. There was more anger, frustration, fighting, and arguing. What he didn't expect was that the conditions on this third little world would be such as to cause these little groups of atoms, these little puffs of his breath, to become angry and form into violent storms, with his breath becoming howling, raging wind and terrible flashes of lightning, which was his own energy being torn from him. He realized he had created a monster. He hurriedly built a fourth world so he could aim these lightning bolts at it to give a release valve for the pressure buildup on the third little world. As the bolts of lightning kept getting larger and larger, that same thought kept coming back. There has to be someplace else, something more than this. This is no good. We're just not getting anywhere at all here. So one huge storm, the biggest on the whole of planet number 3, the leader of the pack, you might say, formed into a lightning bolt very strong and determined to explore further as to what was out there. He gathered all his energy, took a huge breath, and exhaled, sending a very large lightning bolt over to planet 4, Earth. It was coming at a tremendous speed. The thought form of Lucifer, humanity, moves to Earth. Earth, beautiful, verdant Earth, that green jewel, and what's been going on with planet Earth. He begins to realize that reincarnation is the only logical, sensible, compassionate way to run his little world. He was going to need another little world for them to progress to. They would need to be brought back together because, after all, they had started out as one and were shattered apart. No wonder they were lost and unhappy and fighting amongst themselves. What a shock to all, to be shattered into all those little sparks. No wonder they felt so alone, and they really and truly did need to help each other. He realizes that he has done all he can as far as the different groups helping each other, and he begins to see the necessity for rules and regulations to govern the cycle of lives. These rules and regulations would include the recirculation of these beautiful divine sparks of his that really and truly try so hard at times to do the right thing, but still have many problems. It will never stop. You will never stop being because you are a part of it all. There is no way you can get out of being part of the all. You are, and you may as well accept that there is so much more to you than you thought, and accept that you are much more important than you thought, as you are God. You are the Creator God on all size scales. The central core of the universe is the Creator, the energy center. The flare that leaves the central universal core is the Oversoul. The sparks that shower from the Oversoul are our individual souls. It is like looking into a mirror, into a mirror, into a mirror, and so on. This is how the universe seems, and why it seems to have no boundaries, and the pattern of creation is repeated over and over and over.